Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to episode 37 of the ESG Show. So, sometimes it seems to me that all of these discussions we're having boil down to fiduciary duty. Critics of ESG say it clashes with the fiduciary duty of a company. Geoff, who we'll be hearing from shortly, says cyber is an important fiduciary duty. But I don't think it is an addition to fiduciary duty at all. I don't think you can separate fiduciary duty from ESG or cyber. A company that pays insufficient attention to cyber concerns, the environment, social and governance, is neglecting its fiduciary duty. A company that has a long-term plan and a company that sees the bigger picture and understands that what it does has a wide impact that can in turn affect its own viability, cares about ESG and cares about cyber. A company sitting in the supply chain that experiences a crippling cyber attack can bring the entire supply chain down with it. That is why when an organization looking to create a resilient supply chain not only needs to worry about environmental factors and human rights, it must be aware of cyber resilience too. Then there's all this behavioural stuff. Daniel Kahneman, with his famous book, Thinking Fast and Slow, which I was planning to show you at this point, but which seems to have disappeared from my screen. So I'll pull that up shortly. He says we're not as rational as we like to think. We think fast and we think slow. Thinking fast was necessary for our survival, but fast thinking is less rational. Slow thinking is more careful, considered, but is often ruled by our fast thinking side as we thoughtfully but erroneously give rational explanations for our instinctive reaction to surprising occurrences. And that fast thinking side of us makes us vulnerable to manipulation, which is why an organization that needs good cyber needs to get its S-bit right as well. For this episode of the ESG, we teamed up with SWCSC, who are organising an in-person event. I'm going to tell you a little bit about more than that in just a second, but I've been working very closely with Geoff Revill from SWCSC, and we discussed the very topic of behavioural and the importance of training staff. So I'm just going to quickly run a 45-second video in which we spoke about that.
And I think that leads through not just to help and guidance, but also training of the people at the front line, giving them the support they need to be good IT users and not cyber risks. And the more that we understand that, because I think it's something on, depending on who you ask and what stats, but essentially most breaches that occur, about 70-80% of them are due to human error, mistakes, being tricked, etc. It's not some computer hacker tricking the tech. It's mostly they go for the weak points, and the weak points are unfortunately the people who aren't aware of the risks that they pose by acting inappropriately using their digital systems.
Okay, well, thank you, Geoff. And as I say, Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. It's a great book which explains this idea that we're not as rational as we think we are. And this irrational side of us, cyber criminals can play to that, which is why getting the S bit right within a company is really important. Now, we've teamed up with SWCSC for an event next week on May the 23rd. Now, this is an in-person event and all the tickets have been sold out. But I've got good news for you, because you can watch it online as well. And you can watch it online in conjunction with the ESG show. The event is split into 3 sessions, so you can focus on the areas that you need most help understanding. Invites to those 3 sessions are all available on LinkedIn, and you can click on them in the normal way, but with one exception. We've also got QR codes as well this time. So if you go to this screen on my LinkedIn page, you can call up the QR codes to watch the particular show. However, the second show next Thursday, is a little bit different, because we've got a speaker from the UK government talking about their new cyber regulation, which we are going to be discussing with one of our guests shortly. Now, this is an important regulation, and we believe it could actually set a global trend. So getting the spokesman, who's the government lead from this, to talk about it is a bit of a big deal, really. But unfortunately, because of the nature of who the speaker is, it has to be a closed event, and we can't record it. So in order to watch that session, that's the second session next week, you have to sign up. Click on the link and it will take you through it. It's not a problem. You can only watch it live. There won't be an opportunity to watch it on catch up. So bear that in mind. Anyway, moving swiftly on, I want to tell you about a survey that we did. And the survey, if you just bear with me while I call it up. So we asked, do you believe there is an intersection between ESG and cyber security? And just under half, 40%, said they think there's a partial overlap. 35 strongly agree. They think they strongly agree that there's an overlap. 18% said there's only a minimal overlap. With the rest, and I can't do the maths that quickly, but I think it's around about 7%, said that there is no lap at all. Anyway, I think it's time to meet today's guests. And on the show with us today, we have Marti. Hello,
Hi.
Marti. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yes, I'm excellent, thank you. So Marti is a practice lawyer since 1999. She's currently a partner at Knights, a national law firm with over 23 offices throughout the UK. She's an experienced corporate lawyer looking to build long-standing relationships with all her clients. Now, Marti, I wanted to pick your brains for a few moments. This new regulation that's coming out of the UK, as you know, the government lead on this is talking about this at the event next week. But I thought you could give us a little bit of a teaser. Can you talk a little bit about the background and give a brief summary of the impact of this?
Well, the background is that as a country, we have a national cybersecurity strategy, and cyber is at the heart of the government's sort of plan to level up and ensure digital inclusion, to ensure that as a nation we are digitally transformed. But if we're going to become, a fair and equal society with opportunities across the board, we have to protect people's data, and we have to protect the technology we have. So the new regulations, there's two important pieces of regulations. One, 29th of April 2024, which is really to protect consumers, but obligations are imposed on manufacturers who now have to, when they manufacture things, they can't leave it open for people to hack into smart technology easily, which is, the old passwords 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's done away with. You can't have products which are put out onto the market with and easy to hack into. And the second part is which is currently under consultation, which is the guidance around. It's called the cyber guidance, and it's kind of imposing more obligations on business, and business probably needs it. I read a really interesting stat today. 59% of medium companies and 69% of large businesses have suffered a cyber security attack. So it's imposing more duties on the people who run those companies to make sure they have in place plans and strategies to in relation to cybersecurity.
Okay, thank you for that. And I think a theme that we're going to see repeated today is that it's partly about getting people at the top of an organization to be very aware of these issues, which I think ties in very much with ESG as well, actually. So can you tell me a little bit, so you're going to be talking next week at this event. Can you just very, very briefly just summarize what you're going to be discussing?
Well, I'm just going to talk a bit about, explain what ESG means. I mean, not everybody still understands it, and explain the contextual background in that the UN has a series of sustainable development goals, which I would say the ESG agenda has fallen out of that. And so I'm going to give a bit of contextual background and then explain how it relates to tech and in cybersecurity in particular, and how cybersecurity cannot be seen. I mean, you said it earlier that it's not an and, it's really part of anyone's ESG strategy.
Okay, thanks for that. So can we just sort of unpick this slightly? So we've got the E, we've got the S, and we've got the G. So how does, in as few words as possible, because I don't want to steal your thunder from next week. So I just want to just some headlines. But how is the E, the environment bit of ESG, intrinsically linked to cybersecurity?
Well, if you think about it like this, most of the innovation in the decarbonisation of our energy supplies, of trying to reduce our consumption, is going to come about as a result of technological advances and innovation. And as soon as you add in the technological advances, you can see how it's open to be, hacked into, interrupted, unless you're secure. So I think it's not hard. If you just think of a power plant and technology in there, if somebody hacks into it, then that can have catastrophic impacts on both people living close to it, but also in terms of just the energy supply to people who rely on it.
Okay, thank you for that. And now, moving swiftly through the acronym, what about S? How does cyber relate to the S bit of ESG?
I think most people understand GDPR and protecting people's data. It's kind of like the right to privacy is part of is a human right. I think, it's part of our, everyone understands that. But in terms of how data is shared and used and who has access to it, I think the social becomes, I mean, if you, most countries are global. If you think of certain other countries, probably don't have as much individual protections, and I think you can just see how it's open to people's individual rights to privacy is open to abuse unless there's protection in place, and that can have a ripple effect, particularly when you see countries which are having social or political upheaval. Then you can see how access to data becomes important. Whoever has it maybe has a way of controlling people. So the social is the deepest mine you can go down when you start to think of it. But on a basic level, it's about protecting people's right to privacy.
Okay, which ties in with is the human right for privacy, which and the S bit of ESG is closely aligned with human rights. So now the viewers of the ESG show are a clever bunch of people, and I reckon they can guess what my next question is going to be. So I've asked you about how the E intersects with cyber. I've asked you how the S intersects with cyber, and I reckon people have already guessed that I'm about to ask you, how does the G bit intersect with ESG? And as a lawyer, I'd imagine that's very much in your home territory. So over to you.
I mean, the UK has, just the UK alone has a plethora of laws which protect, are there to that govern the way businesses are run, both, companies that are not working in this space, but companies who are working in space, there's regulations you have to comply with, there's reporting that you have to do, and it's if you don't do it correctly, then you're fined. So yeah. The governance aspect is probably one of the ones people talk about the least, but probably the most important, because we all have to operate within the law, and we all have to report. And as we become more aware of as technology advances, then there's more things that the government then seeks to control. I mean, let's not even start talking about AI and what the government plans to do there.
Okay, thanks for that, Marti. Well, if you don't mind, it'd be great if you could join us again in a few minutes. I'm just going to. So I spoke to Geoff a few days ago, and Geoff can't be with us live, but what he had to say was quite important, I think. So I'm just going to be running. It's a 5-minute video before I then start talking to our other guests today, and this is what he said. Geoff Revill, you on the ESG show. Can you tell me a little bit about the cyber the event ESG through a cyber lens?
Sure. So Southwest Cybersecurity Cluster is an organization that brings the community of cyber professionals together. And we've been talking with them about the things that they like us to focus on and help them understand. And one of the things that came out was there was a very altruistic element to our community that wanted to see much more positivity around the things that they do, because these are the people that sit in the back office and are very rarely understood or seen. And, you know, when businesses are trying to do the right thing, you know, meet their ESG goals, almost all of those goals are underpinned by the organization's cybersecurity posture and capabilities. And I thought, let's do a talk around how these things come together. How does ESG and cyber come together? And that was kind of the genesis of the concept of this event, which is an annual event we run every year. Let's make that connection. Let's understand that connection and help the wider audience, both within the ESG and business leaders and cyber professionals, bring those three audiences together to understand those connection points.
Okay. I mean, one of the messages I get over and over again when I talk to people in ESG is the importance of the concepts of ESG being ingrained into an organization, how it needs to be the C-suite need to be behind it, and it kind of needs to be entwined into everything the organization does. I suppose in a way it's a little bit like privacy by design, ESG by design. And I think that's the same applies to cybersecurity, doesn't it? It's a very similar in that concept, in that respect.
It should be. It historically hasn't been, as most business leaders will tell you. They only half of them even discuss cyber at the executive board level on a regular basis. And the latest stats from the government show that. So yes, they should, but they don't. It's often a bit like ESG, not a sufficiently understood component of the organization's resilience. And that's why in this event, we do have a speaker coming in to talk about what the government are going to be doing about that.
It seems to me that governance is the key. I mean, governance is so important to cyber. And governance is an important part of ESG. And indeed, you've got a couple of hours devoted to the topic of governance and cyber in the event. So what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so I mean, organizations are integral to society, and society needs as much governance as the organizations do, and that's why we've got laws like GDPR and things like that, because digital is integral to society and digital is integral to business success and business capability. So if you properly understood your risk register to your business and really comprehended, how are you going to achieve your environmental goals? I guarantee you those environmental goals will have a digital component. And if you don't have a cyber posture to that digital component, better be thinking hard about why not, because that's going to undermine your ability to follow through with that. Any business, certainly in a B2C, but most businesses have a societal element to them. They're either trying to give back at society or they're trying to construct ways to, improve society. And it's the way in which we engage with people is very often digital. It's almost exclusively that in some cases, unfortunately, these days. And again, if we're not truly understanding how the cyber element underpins that, and we're not truly understanding both the risks to that function of the organization, and indeed the opportunities that reside within that. And within cyber itself, governance is a big issue. There's a lot of discussion and arguments around the right way to approach this. How should governance be put in place? But like any good governance, if it doesn't start from the top, it's not really properly implemented. So just like ESG, if it's not in the boardroom being discussed as an executive function, it's not being properly understood. And that's definitely true for cyber. And that's why, organizations are being encouraged to address that issue. So, for example, one of the things that's being discussed as part of the talks in the third session will be all about supply chain. And the reality is that no business supply chain is secure unless its weakest link in the supply chain is secure. Because the way that digital works and the way it connects from me to you to everybody else is that, he who is successfully hacked is the one that brings the whole chain down. And organizations very often don't think about that wider perspective, and that's both has societal impacts and business impacts that need to be fully understood, and governance models should take that into account.
Okay, well, thank you. That was Geoff. And now I'm going to be joined by Penny. Hello, Penny. Let me make Geoff disappear. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good. And where are you dialing in from today?
Buckinghamshire.
Buckinghamshire. Oh, well, I have to have a chat about that. I used to live in Buckinghamshire. So Penny Jackson began her career as a broadcaster, working for the BBC World Service, achieving senior broadcast director status. She continued to develop her career and skills from within the BBC, leading on major change management programs. Since leaving the BBC to set up a consultancy, Penny has built up a successful portfolio career in organisational learning and development, communications, transformation projects. Her career has spanned both permanent and strategic advisory roles within the public and private sector. Over the last 7 years, Penny has become a respected leader in cybersecurity, awareness and engagement. She leads the engagement and communication for the Cyber Operational Readiness Support Programme CORES on behalf of NHS Digital, working in tandem with 10 trusts and PHSE. Her most recent permanent role was as a security awareness strategic leader for the John Lewis Partnership. Her focus has been to help businesses and organisations to articulate the behavioural governance policy and processes required to achieve organisation cultural shift to improve business resilience through effective cyber security engagement. Penny also designs and delivers cybersecurity board-level crisis command exercises with a lens on the impacts on the communications chain employee behavioural responses during a cyber crisis. So, Penny, I'm fascinated to see you look at employee behavioural response during a cyber crisis. Tell me a little bit, what have you learned from that?
It's interesting, you talked about the slow and the fast learning, and how in the moment in time we think, particularly in a crisis, we think fast, we react, and we need to. We're built to do that. But the problem with that is it doesn't necessarily support the best decision making. And so what's important is that you practice crisis response. So there's a muscle memory that takes over and supports and sort of doesn't drown out, but contains the fast thinking so that you get slow thinking benefits. I think the problem with anything to do with a crisis is people chase the problem, like chasing the football. But actually what you need to do is have people step back and look at what their role should be within a crisis, and that the human behaviour is not to go, oh, we'll all want to try and help in one specific area, but just take your role, own that role, and you're supporting the whole process and response.
Okay, thank you for that. And can you just very briefly tell us what you're going to be discussing next week?
Well, I'm talking about this virtual learning benefit within society and business. So business drives management of risk of cyber in terms of tech, in terms of training. And it is how that seeps out into the wider business context and within society, and improves the social relationship and understanding around cyber risk.
Okay, thank you. Now, still on the theme of behavioural science, can you talk about the link between behavioural science and cyber, and how that relates to the S bit in ESG?
Well, it's interesting because you mentioned, I saw about both you and Geoff use the T word, the training word. Now, businesses drive training opportunities to try and improve the relationship with cyber, but actually, if without behavioural understanding, and some of the platforms that people can adopt into their organisations if they don't want to do them themselves, are identifying behavioural changes. And it's that you need to look at, because anyone can train anything, but what you're looking for is understanding. And that's the difference between training and behavioural driven learning that it ultimately benefits socially within business and socially within societal environment.
Thank you for that, Penny. Sorry, I lost my the cursor on the screen then, and I couldn't
dropped off somewhere.
No, I've got two screens, and my cursor. Sometimes I can't find my cursor. But anyhow, a theme that comes up a lot on the ESG show is the importance of resilience in the supply chain. And I think that this plays into the cyber angle as well. Can you outline the importance of cyber to supporting a resilience supply chain?
Well, interestingly enough, supply chains, when people then adopt or bring them into their companies, they talk about the word outsourcing. But we're not talking about outsourcing, we talk about bringing in another company, often to use your platforms, finding ways in to support you, email, whatever the chains are, to do the job that you don't want to have to do yourself, such as an HR system. What happens, though, is that without an assurance and the management and the support of a supply chain to be able to understand and manage their own cyber risk, they're putting your organisation at risk. So the benefit of larger organisations that have understood the risk and manage it for themselves to educate and support the smaller organisations that have less funding and less ability and time to pay attention to it, and yet we want their services. That's where the supply chain, having a virtuous learning opportunity, providing them with learning opportunities and giving them that helping hand, is actually beneficial for the whole ecostructure.
Okay, thank you. Now, you also talk about the importance of educating not just the procurement team, but budget holders as well. Can you explain a bit more?
I can. Now, so my example, it comes from the NHS, in that budget holders are very often clinicians who are given money maybe from a charitable organisation to raise money for a piece of kit that a clinician really wants, maybe an MRI machine. However, the enthusiastic purchasing of that machine, however sophisticated or simple, such as a running machine that has a heart monitor on it, needs to be understood that when they're buying it, it is also connecting to a network. It is an internet-enabled thing. And without understanding the cyber risk of that thing to a network, they could actually cause problems. And also, building into the secure by design, you must understand how to put it onto the network and not ask your IT team to have to work backwards to try and shoehorn it into an old structure.
Okay, thank you for that, Penny. Can you join us again in a few minutes when we talk about some other things? Also on the show today is Kelvin. Kelvin, where have you gone? There you are. Hello, Kelvin. Hello, Kelvin. How are you today?
Yeah, great. Thanks for the invite.
Good. Pleasure. And where are you dialing in from today?
So in the northeast, actually, in County Durham, or on the southern tip of Darlington. You've probably heard of it, I'm sure.
Yes, funnily enough, I have. Yes. So Kelvin started his career in WEEE, is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, waste electrical and electronic equipment.
Okay. Secure IT asset disposal in the same year that the UK WEEE directive was implemented, which was 2007. Kelvin continues to work through an ever evolving landscape through the regulatory minefield, and has been instrumental in ensuring customers and his wider network are kept up to date with the adjustments required. Kelvin has an infectious approach in helping his network, creating a better understanding of the various challenges an organisation faces and tailoring solutions to mitigate risks involved, assisting companies become secure, green and efficient as possible, whilst managing their asset life cycle is something Kelvin is passionate about. So Kelvin, creating this understanding is crucial to cyber. It's not just about technology, is it? There's a strong, I think a lot of people, they think of cyber and they think, oh, it's complicated, it's about technology, but actually it's more about humans and how humans tick. The human angle is key. Is that right? And how do you communicate in that respect?
Yeah, it is. I would go so far as saying it's a bit more than key. Even it's critical, really, because these people that are making decisions about what happens to their IT kit at its end of life stage are the ones that have got the risk to manage, as we see it. So everything that they do and judge us and others against in terms of weighting criteria for tenders, as an example, is really interesting. We see lots of different examples of certain people asking for the most economic solution. That happens quite a lot. But more and more now, we're seeing tenders come through where it's actually much more orientated towards certainly the ESG, as we're talking about, and CSR initiatives. But the green credentials of an organization in supply chain now is really gaining a lot of traction.
Okay, thank you. And can you just very briefly tell us what you're going to be discussing next week?
Yeah, so in a nutshell, what we're going to be talking about is the benefits to organizations of actually having robust audit trails in place for their end-of-life IT equipment, whether that's working or not, and how actually just doing the baseline in terms of regulatory and governance requirements is not really good enough anymore. Customers, when they're looking for solutions, are looking for more than just the basic government stated requirements.
Okay, thank you for that. And you say recycling is good, it's better than not having recycling, but you say reuse is better than recycling. Can you expand on that, and how does that relate to cyber and technology?
Yeah, so in the waste and recycling industry, there's something that is called the waste hierarchy. Effectively, it's putting a bit of a league table in place for different options when something is to be disposed of. But it even starts before that. It starts with things like prevention. So then you've got the reuse before recycling. So in effect, what we're saying is that, yes, we can recycle the kit if it's not working and you need it to be recycled in line with the WEEE directive. But actually, if it is working and it's in a decent condition that somebody probably would buy, then why not consider authorization the kit for reuse, whether the hard drive is erased or destroyed from a data protection point of view. But then, like I say, that the rest of the chassis, whether it's a laptop, desktop, server, and so on, could actually be reused, which can also bring a commercial benefit as well. Because if there's a kit buyback, as it were, where we can sell all of the kit instead of just recycling it, it does have so many pros to making that decision and reusing the kit, whether it's here in the UK or also helping developing countries as well with infrastructure that they wouldn't necessarily be able to get their hands on.
Okay, and can you talk just a little bit, no more than for about a minute, on legislation?
Yep.
You know, you've got your GDPR, you've got the UK WEEE. How do people say that in a certain way? Do they say we or something?
It is. Yeah, not quite like that, but yeah, we.
The UK WE directive, etc. Can you enlighten us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the industry that we work in is, dare I say it, I know we've got some legal expertise on here today, but it's probably one of the most legislation-driven services and industries. Not only have you got all of the kind of legal register that any business would have if they're operating in the UK, but yeah, the WE directive, the hazardous landfill directive, we've got also the UK battery regulation. So there's so many parts of the jigsaw, as it were, that we obviously understand ourselves and help and encourage other customers to be able to navigate through those minefields as well. But yeah, it's just through years and years of being in the industry that you obviously could start to get your head around it, because it can cause headaches at times when you're trying to read through it all.
Okay, I just got one more question for you. I think you say that companies that do the bare minimum to comply will find themselves losing out, particularly in the long run. And that, assuming this is tenders to do with cyber, are now asking for sustainability and green credentials. Is that right? And can you sort of enlighten us a little more about that?
It is, yeah. So quite often, as an end recycler, as it were, we'll be helping IT value-added resellers, MSPs, distributors, and so on in competing in tenders as their specialist partner for the end-of-life stage. And in the past, like say, the sustainability criteria within a tender might have really been what you might call a token gesture, where they'll say, oh, as long as you can take it away for us at the end of its life, then yeah, you get a tick in the box. Well, now customers are actively asking for reuse percentages as opposed to recycling. They're asking for money back for the reuse of kit. So just by recycling, which really is the legal requirement, that's not really going to score highly on tenders anymore. People are looking for so much more from their supply chain and innovative solutions in terms of how you can actually deal with end-of-life kit, save carbon footprint, and things like that. So yeah, it's quite an interesting change, and it's nice to see the end users that are putting the tenders together actually incorporate all of this now.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that, Kelvin. If it'd be okay, it'd be nice if you could join us in a few minutes again. And also on the show today, we have Rupert Irons. Hello, Rupert.
Hi, Michael.
How are you today? And where are you dialing?
Amazing. Yeah, pleased to be here. As also one of the directors of the Southwest Cluster, I'm really keen that we're supporting and promoting the conference next week. So yeah, so really pleased to be here. Thanks.
Great. Well, it's great to have you here. So Rupert is the business director for C3IA. Have I said that right?
Yeah.
Solutions focus on the delivery of NCSC assured cybersecurity consultancy services across government and to a broad consumer base in the private sector. Over the past 8 years with C3IA, he has helped numerous organisations to understand and address their cyber risks from a business perspective, applying a range of tailored governance and technical solutions to improve cyber resilience. He's an advocate for the normalisation of cyber within routine enterprise risk management and the importance of a cyber-aware board to drive this. Previously, Rupert worked in BT Group and the Royal Navy in a series of information systems and security roles. He's a voluntary director of the Southwest Cybersecurity Cluster, supporting his work to foster the regional cyber security community. It's been interesting doing that work for the Royal Navy, I would imagine. I have a funny feeling you might not be allowed to talk about it, are you? I
mean, I think we know that most people in the Navy, they can swing the lantern pretty well. share a good dip, but I don't think we've got time for it today, Michael, so we'll have to do that some other time. But yeah,
All right.
I certainly had a good 20 years and certainly enjoyed my time serving before the last 10 years where I've been
well, I
other stuff.
look forward to talking to you about your old sea dog tales anyway. But so Rupert, what are you discussing next week?
Okay, well, I mean, as you sort of just pitched, I spend most of my time working up at the sort of governance and board level with businesses to help them try and understand cyber risks and the like. So we're sort of taking a pretty broad approach with the title of sort of the many routes to good cyber governance. It is a wide topic, but what I'm going to try and aim to do is help the audience understand the options that are open to them to improve their cyber resilience within their organization. I think that, you know, if you look across a lot of the attacks, and we've heard some statistics already, I'm sure we'll hear some more as we go forward. You know, when you actually get to the root cause analysis of them, you come back to something with a policy or a procedural decision, and shows that there's some weak governance sitting there. So absolutely establishing the right tone at the top is critical. I think the other part of it is that from research that's been carried out, particularly down at the sort of grassroots level by people like the Southwest or the National Resilience Centres and police forces, have identified that one of the most common things that stops people from really embracing cybersecurity is the complexity of it and this understanding that there's so many choices. How do I know what to do? What's right for me? And so that's really what I'll be looking at, to try and sort of weave our way through some of those options and let people come with some thoughts around what might be the best for them. And it's particularly hard, you know, that's within the UK, but for organisations that are working globally, you know, multiple jurisdictions, complex data protection law, that they have an even harder time. I'm not going to solve all their problems in one afternoon, but certainly, hopefully, give them some good food for thought.
Okay, thank you for that. So Rupert, I wanted to talk to you about an article that you spotted. MOD data breach, UK Armed Forces personal details accessed in hack. Can you just tell us a little bit about this story?
Yeah, of course. And I think this is a story we'll probably return to for general discussion as well. So I'll set the scene a little bit about it so that other people can give their perspectives too. This is pretty hot news. It broke at the beginning of last week and it's made public that the Ministry of Defence payroll system had been hacked and that maybe 270,000 military or military-related personnel's records had been probably downloaded and certainly accessed. There's certainly a suspicion this is foreign nation state, but no one's attributed it as such as yet. But it did lead to a very quick announcement statement in the House of Commons the following day, last Tuesday, by the Defence Secretary, you know, to say what the status was and what they were doing to address the problem, which was an 8-point plan, very much an instant response activity, you know, making sure that things were closed down, they could look at the problems that they were having, and also providing reassurance to those organisations, to the individuals that may have their data gone. But what was really interesting, which is fairly rare at an early stage, was that he also pointed the finger quite quickly that actually it was this payment network was provided by a contractor, and that there was evidence of potential failings by them, which had made it easier for the malign actor to gain entry. That's all he said publicly, but there's been a lot written. I'm sure we might discuss a bit more about exactly how and who that happened. But I think it is still at a very early stage. And what we'll expect to see following on clearly is the forensic investigation as to how it happened, what the wider impact is, what any impact individuals might take months or even years until we're clear on that picture. But clearly it's a very significant hack, and we need to draw the lessons from it from a governance and resilience perspective. I think, you know, what's really important is that actually what we're seeing here is another supply chain attack, because it was MOD data, but it was a supplier that was providing the systems and the services around using that data. And what we see is this all the time. You know, an actor will try and find that weakest way in to get what they look for, which is often in a third party. We've seen a lot more of these over the last 5 years. And the challenge for organizations, I think, is to understand and manage the risk in their supply chains, which are often extended, numerous, multiple different organizations those organizations are all on their own different levels of journeys towards their own cyber resilience. And so I think what we've seen historically is that many sort of supply chain assurance activities are done on trust and on contract. They'll promulgate terms with requirements within contracts, but it's often very much taken on trust as to what they say. and they'll rely on a self-assessment response or some sort of statement attestation. Oh yeah, I've done these things. You can trust us. We've got your information secure. But now what's interesting in this case, of course, is the MOD, because of its security-related activity, was quite early in defining a supplier assurance framework in which they call the Defence Cyber Protection Partnership. And that's also backed up with real checks on suppliers to see if they're doing what they say they're doing. But I think what we have to remember with the MOD is that they've got a supply chain which includes people which are supplying and supporting the nuclear deterrent and weapon systems and operations, as well as what might be perceived back office type of functions, which obviously have a rich amount of data for an attacker, but maybe not given the same priority as some of the sort of more front end type of activities. So early days, can't know exactly what the outcomes and learning will be, but I think this is definitely one to watch over the next sort of few months, and I expect that we'll see some changes in how the mod seeks to then assure its suppliers as we move forward.
Okay, thank you. And lessons for organisations? What lessons do you think organisations can learn from this, from a government's perspective?
Yeah, so I think what we'll see from a governance perspective is that we're going to see, firstly, for those organisations that don't have anything in place, there's going to be something. An NCSC assessment a year or so ago reckoned that there was only about 11%, sorry, not even that, 13% of larger businesses that were really doing supply chain assurance. So that's a huge amount that aren't. So the sort of structures I just discussed, which are around that sort of trust self-attestation, that's not even in place for maybe 80+% of organizations. So that needs to happen first. And then I think those that feel that they have a particular threat, and once they look at their own risks, are going to have to do more and invest more in contracting or bringing on their own ability to assure their suppliers are then doing what they say they're doing. So I think that's going to be the key lesson.
Okay, thank you for that, Rupert. And I know, Marti, you were also interested in this report. There's an article in The Guardian, MOD contractor hacked by China, failed to report the breach for months. So can you give us your perspective on this story?
Yeah, I guess just give it to a perspective from a lawyer's perspective. It's kind of getting a call like that from a client to say that they've been, I kind of think of the best word, they've been caught out in this way is a nightmare. I mean, I'm just thinking, if it was a client of mine, how many teams would now be working on this at the expense of this company? And I mean, you would definitely be having the data team working on it to look at what's happened, potential for prosecution, fine. You'd be having somebody look from the contracts team looking at it to, in case, because this is a company that promotes itself as supplying government agencies. It says it's got a client, the Ministry of Defence, the Met Police, and various other departments of the government. And this is just in the UK. It's actually part of a wider group, a French company. So it has customers all over the world, governmental customers all over the world, who will now be thinking this company isn't a good company to do business with because they've got weaknesses in their systems. But in terms of legal teams, you'd be having the contract, because there's a potential that the people, this is clearly a breach of that contract. Well, not clearly, but possibly a breach of that contract. But there'll be other contracts which will be looking at if around disrepute potentially. So other customers will be looking, maybe they can get out their contract with this supplier. I mean, it would be there'd be a reputational team looking at it, because you're going to have to be dealing with PR. So it's got all the hallmarks for me. This company is not only going to have to be dealing with its customer here, who's going to be really unhappy. It's going to have to be dealing with a huge fallout, which is going to be very expensive, just in terms of lawyers and in terms of whatever other players are involved. I can see it being a hugely expensive thing, hugely embarrassing, and a lot of reputational damage for this company.
Okay, so that's the contractor that the MOT
Yeah.
employed. Right. Okay. And Penny,
the company that was named by, I mean, I don't think the Grant Shapps would have named it if he didn't feel confident that they were responsible. So he was named, the company was named at Parliament, which is quite a major thing for someone to be named in Parliament. And it's not a backbencher using parliamentary privilege. This is the minister concerned naming the company and saying it's not the MOD's system at fault here, it's a contractor, which, as I said, I think it's a huge amount of reputational damage for that company.
Yeah, I can imagine there was a lot of tension in that company when it was being.
And I think being accused of sitting on it as well. That's the thing. It's something they apparently happened months ago. So to have sat on it, even that's doubling down on the reputational damage, because I think if something like that happens, you have to act quickly and talk to your customer. In this case, the customer's the MOD. I'm not even going into the aspects of who the hacker is, because I mean, I'm just looking at it purely from a lawyer's perspective. If I had got the call from my client saying this was something that happened to them, I would be, despite what people think about lawyers, I wouldn't be doing this and I'm going to get loads of money. I would be thinking, oh my gosh, we've got lots to do here to protect the client.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that, Marti. And Penny, I think you've got thoughts about this matter as well. Do you want to come in on this?
Well, it's interesting that there is a framework that has, sort of been set up to respond to the management of contract. But actually, if you talk about, it's one of the sort of least attention paid to managing and understanding why these contracts are not looked at, not just end to end, as in the beginning and the end of the contract, but also in the middle. And assurances, if they're only required by a paper assurance or passing a certain level of certification, it is not looking at the ongoing management of that contract. And that education process of both the procurement team within the MOD, in this case, and the team that are supplying needs to be a continuous assurance. In other words, checkpoints coming in at certain points to say, yes, we are managing your contract safely. Had that happened in a more regular rhythm, that problem may have been picked up more quickly. And similarly, I think if you look at it from a behavioural point of view, if they'd educated people into what the risks of some of their behaviours in terms of sharing information could be, sometimes it's around poor email relationships. Is in other words, not BCCing. It's very simple. We talk about complexity in cyber, but often the solution is straightforward and mundane, and people feel confused by the complexity of the word cyber and don't realise actually it's simple things like checking how you shared information. And in this case, PII data, you've got to be really careful how you do it, but it's straightforward how to be safe. And I think all of those things, if you debunk it, make it simpler, and also assure your contract continuously, you're less likely to pitfall in the supply chain.
Yeah, interesting. I think maybe the word cyber, but it scares people. The word cyber, it's so technical, doesn't it? But it's actually not technical. Not
I
necessarily.
totally agree with you. I have a little bit of a beef about the word cyber. There are some amazing things that people do to hunt down the threat. That's no doubt about it. And it's the bit that the industry gets excited about. That's where money's made, where people are coming up with great solutions. But if you hide it behind the word cyber, most people don't know what that actually means when they're being asked to manage the risks themselves. If you talk about health and safety, everybody knows if I have to manage my health and safety risk, it's because I need to maintain my health and I need to maintain my safety. Cyber is a non-word and doesn't describe the action required to keep the risk safe.
Yeah, I suppose cyber, it's the sort of thing you see in movies, Hollywood, and the tension, and if it's about health and safety, then it doesn't make good Hollywood, I suppose. So, yeah,
but it makes it other, and as soon as something becomes other, you shove it in that it's too difficult to manage pile, and as a consequence, the behavioural response is, it's not my responsibility. Or if it is it really that simple? I think we need to educate people that actually most of the management of it and protecting yourself is quite mundane.
All right, and it very much plays into the whole governance and also the social bit as well, and making people understand these issues. Okay, well, thank you for that. Kelvin, I wanted to ask you a question because I know you spotted an article touches upon this theme. And what happens to your iPhone when you finish with it?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, isn't it? Because everybody believes Apple being Apple, that there should be something strong and robust in place. They've been criticised heavily in the last few years because they don't make their kit easy to reuse and repair. But they were in the news. First of all, it was a couple of years back, but they've been found to, I suppose, not holding their supply chain to account in such a robust way. So one of the suppliers, I believe in Canada, from reading up on it, had actually sold nearly 100,000 mobile phones. You might call illegally, because obviously the Apple is saying that wasn't meant to be the case. It was meant to be recycled, which goes against obviously all of the green credentials that Apple talk about again as well. But yeah, it's the company in question have said that it was rogue employees. Now, 100,000 mobile phones, far be it from me to really comment on whether that's true or not, is just, it seems a few too many to have been a couple of rogue employees. That's an industrial scale of doing things that they weren't meant to do.
Indeed. Okay, well, thank you for that, Kelvin. We're drawing to a close now, but I wanted to call you all back again, and I want to put you in a position in which you step into an elevator. You're in the elevator, you're going up to whatever floor, and into the elevator with you steps the CEO of a company that you're doing a bit of work for. And the CEO turns around to you and he says, or she says, "Can you tell me about cybersecurity and ESG? How do they relate to each other?" And this person presses the 9th button. The elevator's going up to the 9th floor, so you've got about 45 seconds to answer. So, Marti, I wonder whether you'd like to have a go at that one first. You've got 45 seconds starting from now.
I would say neither topic can be looked at in isolation, as no business can separate their ESG strategy can have an ESG strategy without touching on what they are doing in relation to cybersecurity.
Marti, thank you very much for that reply, and I look forward to seeing you next week. And I'm now going to ask that same question, as he's next to me on the screen as I look at it, to Kelvin. So you've got 45 seconds. What's ESG got to do with cyber?
Yeah, so cyber, in my own humble opinion, being the digital world of or an operation of a business, covers everything now. There's not a business that operates without a computer or some kind of technology. So it's so heavily integrated into everything, and obviously the ESG being the environmental, social, and governance elements of the business that they also touch every activity. So you've just got to make sure that you're hot on everything now. You can't afford not to be.
Okay, thank you for that, Kelvin, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Penny, over to you. You're in the elevator and the CEO steps in and you're under a bit of pressure, or you've got 45 seconds. Over to you.
Well, Kelvin stole a few, but basically the societal impact if we don't manage cyber risk, not just for business, but the whole of society, when we look at something like the MOD or breaches in the NHS, is so great that we can't afford not to pay attention to it. It has to be built a resilience for everyone, citizen resilience, business resilience, in order for us all to be able to manage cyber risk, to operate safely and continue and improve. It has to be continuous improvement to continue resilience and build that in society.
Okay, thank you for that, Penny. And now it's your turn, Rupert. Over to you.
Okay, so I'd say to the CEO, I say, if we don't sort out our cybersecurity, we may not be in business to worry about all the other governance issues you have to manage, because it was proven like 60% of small businesses could go out of business after they've been hacked. And then I'd say to them, I understand that as CEO, you've got to balance the interests of loads of different stakeholders, shareholders, employees, customers, government, etc., but all stand to gain if we're cyber resilient and sustainable. So it's a win-win. That'd be my pitch.
Thank you for that, Rupert. Well, Steve Jobs supposedly used to fire people in the elevator. He used to step in the elevator, ask them a question. If he didn't like their answer, that was it. They were fired by level 9, which is not an approach which would go down well with the ESG people. But I don't think any of you would have been fired for your answers. I thought they were all great answers. So thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing you all next week. And I hope many people watching this will be joining us next week when we are driving into these issues in a lot more depth. So thank you very much. And see you all very soon. Thank you. And
Thanks, Michael.
thank you and goodbye.